The paintings were gone. The sunflower Sophie drew, the rocket Lily colored, vanished. In their place, Henry's smiling face framed in gold, lined across the hallway like a shrine. I dropped the grocery bag. Apples rolled across the floor. "Where are my girls' things?" My voice cracked. No answer, just silence, heavy and rehearsed. I ran upstairs. The twin beds, gone. The bookshelf I painted mint, gone. The growth chart marked with every inch of Sophie and Lily's lives, ripped off the wall. Instead, gray paint. A brand new toddler bed, boxes labeled Henry's toys, a fresh baby monitor blinking. My stomach turned, footsteps behind me, my father's voice flat as stone. "Henry needs the light. He's a boy." I froze. My girls were standing in the doorway, eyes wide, clutching each other. "Grandma said we live downstairs now," Sophie whispered. "Downstairs." I sprinted to the basement, pulled the chain. A weak bulb flickered, showing 2 mattresses on bare concrete. A box fan hummed. Garbage bags stacked in a corner. On top, Sophie's sunflower painting, bent, tossed like trash. Lily tugged my sleeve. "Mommy, why?" Her paper crown slipped from her head. I couldn't breathe. Behind me, Patricia's voice cut sharp as glass. "Don't overreact. Girls are resilient. They'll be fine in the basement." I turned. Her eyes were cold, her smile fixed. "No," I whispered, but the house had already chosen sides. I clenched Sophie's painting against my chest. The edges cutting my palms. My voice trembled, but my anger burned steady. "You moved my children into a basement, without asking me, without telling me." My father didn't even flinch. He leaned against the door frame, arms folded like he'd already won this argument before I walked in. Patricia busied herself with folding Henry's blankets, humming as if the world was perfectly in order. "I pay for this house too," I snapped. "Groceries, utilities, half the bills every month. My daughters deserve more than this." Patricia finally looked at me, her lips curling into something halfway between pity and disdain. "Rebecca, don't be dramatic. They're just girls. They'll survive. Henry needs the best because he carries the family name." The words stabbed deeper than I expected. Just girls. My daughter's laughter, their drawings, their dreams, dismissed in a breath. My chest rose and fell, too tight, too fast. This isn't survival. This is cruelty. But I didn't know what was coming next. Edward's patience had limits, and I could see it unraveling in the set of his jaw. He stepped forward, voice sharp. "You're a guest here, Rebecca. Don't forget it. We gave you and your children shelter when your marriage collapsed. You should be grateful, not combative." Patricia nodded, her voice softer but more cutting. "We can't rearrange the world for your feelings. A boy needs opportunity. Henry is Michael's son. He will carry everything forward. Your girls." She exhaled slowly, shaking her head as though stating a sad but undeniable fact. "They'll marry, they'll move on. You must accept that." They said it like it was simple arithmetic, like Sophie and Lily's worth could be subtracted from the equation without consequence. In their eyes, they weren't villains. They were custodians of tradition, doing what was right. But they didn't know what was coming next. Sophie clung to my leg, her small hand trembling against my knee. Her eyes darted between me and the stripped walls of the bedroom that once belonged to her. Her lips quivered, but she whispered, "Mommy, did we do something bad?" The question shattered me. No 6-year-old should wonder if losing her room was punishment for existing. Lily, younger but fierce, stomped her tiny foot. This is my bed, not Henry's." Her voice cracked, shrill and raw. She lunged toward the empty space where her bookshelf used to stand, as if her toys and books might magically reappear if she demanded hard enough. Patricia bent down, her fake sweet tone dripping sugar and poison. "Now, now, girls, don't cry. It's just a little change. You'll love your new space." She pointed toward the basement door like she was offering a gift. Sophie's face drained of color. Lily buried her head in my hip, muffling sobs against my sweater. And in that moment, even my brave little girls understood something was deeply wrong, but they didn't know what was coming next. When I think about the people in that house, I can't help but see them as characters on a stage, each of them playing their part in a twisted play. Patricia, my mother, was the smiling villain. To outsiders, she seemed generous, always hosting dinners, pouring tea, asking about their children's successes. But behind those thin smiles was a woman who measured worth by gender. Once, when I was short on grocery money, she handed me $50 with exaggerated sweetness. The next week, she demanded $100 back, saying, "That was an investment, for Henry, of course." That's Patricia. Kindness as a weapon, generosity with a string tied to her golden grandson. Edward, my father, didn't raise his voice often, but when he did, it silenced entire rooms. His power was colder, quieter. He didn't argue, he dictated. I'll never forget one night when the girls and I came up from the basement for dinner, only to find the door locked from the other side. I banged on it until my hands ached, my daughters crying behind me. Later, when Edward opened it as if nothing had happened, he just said, "Basements are safer for storms." He called it protection. I called it control. Michael, my brother, strutted through life as if it were all laid out for him. He wore arrogance like cologne, filling every space. He always seemed to have money, yet I knew where most of it came from. Our father's quiet transfers, the house bills mysteriously covered by Michael. Once, after I paid for a major appliance repair, I heard Edward brag to a guest. "Michael handled it. Such a dependable son." I stood in the corner, invisible, swallowing the truth like poison. Vanessa, his wife, hovered at the edges, sharp-eyed and silent, until she found the perfect moment to wound. I overheard her once whispering to Michael, "If Rebecca moved out, this house would finally breathe." She didn't say it to my face, but she didn't have to. I was never meant to stay. And then there was Henry. Sweet, oblivious Henry. He was just a child, innocent in all of this, but they built a throne for him. They crowned him with praise, with space, with meals piled high. He wasn't cruel, not yet, but every word, every smile taught him he was superior. That was my family. That was the stage. And I was the extra, forced to watch from the wings, wondering how long before the play swallowed my daughters whole. It hadn't always been like this, or at least I wanted to believe that. When I first returned home after my divorce, I told myself it was temporary, just until I could save enough for a place of our own. Patricia welcomed me with open arms. Edward carried our bags down to the basement. And for a moment I thought, maybe this is family. There were glimpses of warmth. Movie nights where Sophie and Lily nestled into their grandparents' laps. Bedtime stories with Patricia reading in her sing-song voice. For a while, it almost felt safe, but the cracks appeared quickly. When Sophie came home from school with a math award, she ran to show Patricia, eyes shining. Patricia praised her, holding the certificate up proudly. But Edward's voice cut through the moment like a blade. Don't encourage her. Girls don't need to waste time with numbers. Boys build legacies. Girls support them. Sophie's smile faltered. Patricia didn't argue. She just set the paper aside as if it meant nothing. Then there was the money. I contributed every month, carefully splitting my paycheck, some for bills, some for savings. When the washing machine broke, I paid the repairman, receipts neatly tucked away. Days later, during dinner, I heard Edward bragging to a neighbor that Michael had covered the expense. I opened my mouth, then shut it again. My daughter's wide eyes told me to stay quiet. The worst moments weren't the shouting, they were the erasures. Little by little, our presence shrank. My daughter's toys disappeared from the living room, their shoes pushed to the back of the closet. Once, I found Sophie's artwork folded and stuffed into a drawer, while Henry's finger painting was framed in the hall. I told myself it was survivable, that as long as we had a roof, we could endure the small humiliations. But endurance has limits, and every time I tucked my daughters into bed on that cold basement mattress, I could feel the water rising, inch by inch, threatening to drown us. The night Lily whispered, "Mommy, do we make Grandma mad?" I knew the flood was coming. The signs came faster now, sharper, impossible to ignore. One morning, Sophie showed me her sunflower drawing, carefully colored with yellow crayons. She left it on the kitchen table, proud and excited. That evening, I found it in the trash, folded in half. Patricia was washing dishes, humming. When I asked, she didn't even look at me. It was messy. I tidied up. My stomach churned. Messy? It was my daughter's heart on paper. A few days later, I caught Vanessa whispering to Michael in the hallway. I stood just far enough to hear her words. If Rebecca moved out, we'd finally have the whole house. No more basement freeloaders. Michael chuckled. The sound scraped my bones raw. The photographs on the wall told their own story. First, our Christmas photo disappeared. Then the zoo trip. Each frame replaced with Henry's grin, his baseball glove, his gap-toothed smile. I tried not to notice, but one evening, Sophie stood in front of the wall, staring at the empty patch where her picture had hung. She didn't cry. She just asked quietly, "Mommy, why doesn't Grandma like me?" I didn't know what to say. And then I overheard Patricia on the phone with an aunt. Her voice was syrupy sweet. Henry has the upstairs all to himself. Rebecca and her 2 girls are in the basement. Perfect arrangement, don't you think? The words hit me like a slap. Perfect arrangement. As if my daughters were clutter, tucked away out of sight. Dinner became a battlefield. Henry always got the first serving, the biggest portion, the seat of honor. One night, Sophie reached for mashed potatoes and Edward pulled the bowl away, sliding it to Henry. Lily whispered, "That's not fair." Edward glared so hard she froze, fork still in her hand. Later that night, Sophie curled beside me and asked, "Mommy, are we a mistake? Did I make Grandma hate us?" Her little voice cracked like glass. Something inside me splintered. I started keeping notes, writing everything down. Who said what disappeared, what was taken. Receipts, dates, times. At first it felt paranoid, but I knew the truth. I wasn't imagining this. They weren't just favoring Henry. They were erasing us. And with every passing day, suspicion hardened into certainty. I promised myself I will not let them win. I had been holding my breath for months, watching the walls of that house close tighter around me and my girls. Every picture swapped, every meal stolen, every word that cut a little deeper. I told myself to wait, to gather proof, to protect Sophie and Lily until I could figure out what to do. But a person can only endure so much before something inside cracks. It happened on a Sunday afternoon, sunlight streaming through the blinds as though mocking me with its warmth. Patricia had taken Henry out back to play while Vanessa scrolled through her phone at the table, smiling at nothing but her reflection in the screen. Edward sat across from me, his newspaper spread wide, his silence a verdict in itself. The girls were coloring quietly on the floor beside me, crayons rolling across the hardwood. Sophie was drawing another sunflower, her little hand steady but her eyes clouded. Lily scribbled furiously, pressing so hard the crayon snapped in half. I don't know what possessed me in that moment. Maybe it was Sophie's silence. Maybe it was Lily's broken crayon. Maybe it was the pile of evidence I'd been gathering in secret. Whatever it was, something inside me snapped into place. I stood, pulled my phone from my pocket, and placed it on the table. I flipped through the photos, boxes in the basement, Sophie's paintings stuffed like trash, Lily's rabbit torn apart, receipts with my name, bank statements that disappeared into Michael's account, each one glowing back at me like tiny flames. Vanessa glanced up. "What are you doing?" I slid the phone toward Edward. "Proof," I said simply. My voice shook, but the word was steady. "I've been documenting everything. Every single thing you've done to erase my daughters." For a second, silence thickened the air. Edward folded his paper slowly, eyes narrowing, as if he could will the evidence into nothingness. Vanessa snorted, dismissive. "You're overreacting. Pictures don't prove anything." Sophie looked up at me, her big eyes wide with a flicker of hope. Lily crawled into my lap, clutching my arm as though I'd just declared war on the whole house. "I contribute to this home," I said, louder now. "I pay bills. I feed everyone, and yet my children are treated like ghosts, shoved into a basement while Henry is worshipped like a king." My chest rose and fell so fast I thought my ribs might split. "No more. Not one more day." Edward's jaw tightened. "Careful, Rebecca. You wouldn't want to ruin family harmony." That was the moment I laughed, a hollow, broken laugh that didn't sound like mine. "Harmony? My daughters are living in a basement with trash bags for walls, while Henry sleeps upstairs in a room painted gray like a throne room. You call that harmony?" I hadn't planned on saying it, but the words tumbled out anyway. "We're leaving." The room froze. Vanessa's phone slipped from her hand. Edward leaned forward, his knuckles white against the table. "Leaving? With what money? With what stability? You think you can make it on your own?" I met his eyes, and for the first time in years, I didn't look away. "Yes, I can, and I will." Sophie gasped softly. Lily's tiny fingers dug into my sleeve, and for the first time I saw it, the faint spark in their eyes that said maybe, just maybe they believed me. Patricia walked back inside then, Henry in her arms, his cheeks flushed from running. She took in the silence, the tension, the phone still glowing on the table. "What's going on?" Edward spoke first, his voice cold. "Your daughter thinks she's leaving." Patricia's smile faltered. Just for a second before she forced it back. "Oh, Rebecca, don't be ridiculous. Where would you go?" I picked up my phone, slipped it into my pocket. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. Anywhere is better than here. For the first time, the balance shifted. They weren't mocking me anymore. They were calculating, measuring, realizing I wasn't trapped the way they thought. And in that silence, something new bloomed inside me. Not just anger, not just pain, but possibility. I didn't know what was coming next, not fully, but I knew one thing. The story wasn't theirs to write anymore. It was mine. After that Sunday, I couldn't go back to silence. Something had shifted. My parents might still see me as the dependent, the burden, but my girls had looked at me differently, like maybe I could protect them. I couldn't let that spark die. So I started moving in secret. At night, after everyone was asleep, I'd sit at the kitchen table with my laptop glowing faint blue and start tracing the money. I logged into my accounts, scanned every receipt, every transfer. That was when I noticed the withdrawals, tiny ones at first, $10 here, $20 there, slipping from my contribution account straight into the one under Michael's name. It wasn't just my imagination. My money had been rerouted, month after month. I printed statements at work, slipping them into a folder labeled Client Analysis so no one would suspect. At home, I hid the folder inside Sophie's art supply bin. No one ever touched her things. That was wave 1, proving the theft. But then came wave 2. I needed more than numbers. I needed witnesses, even if they didn't know they were witnesses. So I started recording. My phone tucked in my pocket, audio rolling during dinner conversations. Girls should eat less, keep their figures. Henry's future matters. He'll take care of us. Rebecca, you should be grateful we even give them a roof. Every sentence a knife, every chuckle a twist. I saved them all, labeled the files by date, backed them up to a cloud account only I could access. One night, I almost got caught. Patricia walked into the kitchen while I was renaming files, and I barely had time to slam the laptop shut. She looked at me, her smile too sweet. "Working late?" she asked. My hands were still trembling when she turned away. That was when I realized I wasn't just collecting evidence. I was waging a war, and wars have casualties if you're not careful. Still, I pushed further. Wave 3. I started quietly reaching out. First to Rachel, my colleague. I invited her for coffee under the excuse of a late report. I slid the folder across the table, her eyes widening as she flipped through photos and receipts. "Rebecca, this is abuse," she whispered. "I need proof," I said, "enough to walk out, to fight if I have to." Rachel didn't hesitate. She offered her garage for storage. Every week I'd smuggle out a box, winter coats, baby books, my own binders from work, and stack them behind her lawnmower. My parents thought I was decluttering. Patricia even praised me for finally letting go of childish things. If only she knew. The risk grew heavier. Michael nearly caught me one afternoon when he stopped by unexpectedly. I had a box in my trunk. Sophie's school project stuffed inside. He tapped on the glass, grinning. "What's in the box, sis? Secrets?" My heart nearly stopped, but I forced a laugh. "Old tax files. Boring." He shrugged and walked off, but I felt sweat drip down my back long after. And then came the moment that nearly broke me. It was late, the girls asleep beside me in the basement, their breath soft in the damp air. I heard footsteps above, my parents moving through the house. Then Patricia's voice, muffled but sharp. She's planning something. I can feel it. If Rebecca leaves, she'll shame us. Edward's reply, she won't. She can't. She has nowhere to go. Don't worry. She's trapped. I lay frozen, listening to their certainty. They believed I was powerless. And for a moment, I almost believed it too. But then Lily stirred in her sleep, her little hand curling into mine, and I knew I couldn't let their prophecy be true. So I doubled down. I began calculating a budget for independence, every penny mapped. I cut corners on myself, skipping lunches at work, canceling subscriptions, funneling everything into a hidden savings account. By month's end, I had just enough for a deposit on a small apartment. Not much, but something. The danger grew sharper each day. Vanessa made a snide comment one afternoon. Funny how Rebecca's car is always packed. You hide in things? She laughed, but her eyes lingered too long. I knew she suspected. I had to move faster. One Friday evening, I tested the waters. I told Sophie and Lily in whispers, "Would you like to live somewhere else? Just us?" Their eyes lit like candles. Sophie asked, "Would we have our own room?" Lily squealed, "With my bed back?" I nodded, forcing a smile though fear gnawed at my gut. "Yes, our own space. No basements." But whispers travel. The very next day, Edward confronted me in the kitchen. "You're planning to leave, aren't you?" His eyes were steel, voice low but sharp. My pulse roared in my ears, but I steadied my voice. "I'm considering options." His jaw clenched. "There are no options. You belong here." It wasn't a threat, not directly, but it felt like chains tightening. Still, I had evidence now. Financial theft, verbal abuse, recordings, photos. And I had allies. Rachel with her garage, Aunt Linda with her quiet observations. The pieces were falling into place, though each move risked exposure. One wrong step, and everything could collapse. But the closer I got to freedom, the clearer one truth became. This wasn't just about leaving. It was about showing my daughters that silence was never the answer, that their worth was not negotiable, and so I pressed on, heart pounding, folder growing thicker, every night whispering to myself the same mantra, almost there, almost free. The night it all snapped was colder than usual. The furnace hummed through the floorboards, the walls of the basement trembling with its vibration. Sophie lay curled under her blanket, whispering to Lily about the new apartment we dreamed of. Their whispers floated like prayers, tiny, fragile, but filled with hope. I had almost convinced myself I could wait a little longer, just one more week, one more paycheck. And then I went upstairs. Dinner. The table crowded with plates of roasted ham, green beans slick with butter, mashed potatoes piled high. Everyone was laughing, voices bouncing off the walls. Patricia seated Henry at the head of the table, right next to Edward. My girls sat crammed at the far end, their chairs practically scraping the wall. I watched Lily swing her legs, too small for the chair. Sophie folded her hands, patient, quiet, as Henry grabbed the first slice of ham with greasy fingers. Patricia poured him juice before the glass in front of Sophie was even filled. My chest ached. It wasn't dinner, it was a performance, a coronation for a boy king. Then Sophie reached for the bowl of mashed potatoes, just a spoonful, nothing more. Patricia's hand struck like lightning, snatching the bowl away. "Ladies should be modest," she said sweetly, sliding the bowl to Henry. "Growing boys need more." Sophie froze. Her fork slipped from her fingers, clattering against her plate. Lily muttered under her breath, "That's not fair," her little voice sharp with fire. Edward's glare shot across the table, silencing her instantly. "Respect your elders," he barked. The air went cold. And then Patricia said it, the sentence that seared itself into my bones. "Rebecca, you must understand. Girls will never be as important as boys." She smiled as she said it. Smiled, as though it were a joke or worse, a fact too obvious to argue. I felt something in me tear open. Sophie's eyes brimmed with tears she tried to hide. Lily's fists clenched on the tablecloth, and in their faces, I saw the question, "Will you let them do this to us?" I stood. My chair screeched against the floor, sharp enough to slice through the laughter. Every head turned. "No more," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut like glass. Not one more word, not one more slight, not one more night. Edward's brows furrowed. "Sit down, Rebecca. Don't embarrass yourself." Michael chuckled, smirking over his glass of wine. "Here we go again. Drama queen." Patricia's smile widened, saccharine and sharp. "Rebecca, dear, you're upsetting the children." "Upsetting them?" My laugh came out raw, bitter. "You've already crushed them. You've told them they don't matter. You've stolen their rooms, their toys, their dignity. And you expect me to stay silent?" Vanessa rolled her eyes. "Oh, please, you're overreacting. It's just family dynamics." I reached into my pocket. My phone was already recording, its red dot glowing. I set it on the table, screen facing them. "No," I said, "it's abuse." "And I have proof." Their faces shifted. Edward stiffening, Patricia blinking too fast, Michael's smirk faltering. "I've been documenting everything," I continued. "The money you siphoned into Michael's account, the food stolen, the bills erased, the toys taken, the words, your words, telling my daughters they're worthless. It's all here, every recording, every receipt, every photograph." Patricia laughed, but her voice cracked. "Rebecca, don't be ridiculous." "Who would believe such nonsense?" "I don't need belief. I have evidence." I pulled out the folder Rachel had helped me build, thick with papers, photos, transcripts. I slapped it onto the table, the sound echoing like a gavel. "And if I need to take this to court, I will. If I need to go to child services, I will. You will not erase my daughters." The silence that followed was suffocating. Michael recovered first, leaning back in his chair, smirking again. "Big words, sis. But where will you go?" "You think you can just walk out with nothing?" That was when I delivered the blow. "I already have," I said. Their heads snapped toward me. Patricia's smile vanished. "I've been saving," I continued. "Every lunch I skipped, every extra dollar hidden. I already signed a lease. A small house, 2 bedrooms, one for me, one for the girls. Our boxes are packed, stored away safely where you'll never touch them." Vanessa's jaw dropped. Michael's glass slammed onto the table, wine spilling across the cloth. "You ungrateful," I cut him off. "Ungrateful? I paid for this house to run. My money kept your lights on. My groceries fed your son. And still you treated us like garbage. If anyone here is ungrateful, it's you." Edward's fist struck the table. "Enough," his voice thundered. "You think you can just waltz out, shame this family?" I met his fury with calm, icy certainty. "Yes, and I already have," Patricia sputtered, voice rising. "You'd really do this to your own mother? To your father?" I looked her dead in the eye. "You did it first. Every time you told my daughters they were less. Every time you replaced their pictures with Henry's. Every time you laughed while their hearts broke. You already destroyed this family. I'm just saving what's left of mine. Sophie's small hand slipped into mine under the table. Lily whispered, "Mommy, let's go." And that was the final push. I grabbed my phone, scooped up the folder, and stood tall. "We're done here. Keep your house. Keep your throne for Henry. But you'll never have us again." Michael laughed bitterly, trying to mask the fear in his voice. "You won't last a month out there." I turned back, my daughters at my side, my voice steady as stone. "Watch me." The room erupted. Patricia pleading, Edward shouting, Michael cursing. But none of it touched me anymore. Their voices were static, fading into nothing. For the first time in years, I felt light, powerful, free. And as we walked out of that house, my girls clutching my hands, I knew the climax had come, not just for me, but for them. The chains had shattered. The story was no longer theirs to write. It was ours. Walking out that night felt like stepping off a cliff. The air was sharp and cold, and my legs trembled as if they might buckle under me. But Sophie's hand squeezed mine, and Lily clung to my hip, whispering, "We're free." And that was enough to steady me. The first few days in the new place were chaos. Boxes stacked in every corner, mattresses on the floor, the heat barely working. But the laughter that filled those cracked walls was real. My daughters giggled as they unwrapped their toys, squealed when I hung their artwork on the fridge. For the first time in years, they had space that was theirs. Still, I knew it wasn't over. My parents wouldn't let go so easily. The calls started within a week. Patricia's voice dripping with false sweetness. "Come home, Rebecca. Don't be foolish. The girls need stability." Edward's tone harsher. "You're making a mistake. Families don't air dirty laundry." I let the calls go to voicemail. Every message was saved, cataloged with the rest of my evidence. Then came Michael, pounding on my door one Friday night, his voice echoing down the street. "You think you're better than us? You'll crawl back. You always do." I stood on the other side of the door, phone in hand, recording every word. Sophie peeked from behind the curtain, eyes wide but no longer frightened. She whispered, "He sounds desperate." And she was right, because this time I wasn't powerless. I had proof. I had allies. I had a spine of steel that had been forged in years of belittlement, sharpened by every cruel word my parents had spoken. The next step was mine. I met with a lawyer, sliding the thick folder across the desk. Photos, receipts, audio recordings, even transcripts of the voicemails. He flipped through, eyebrows lifting higher with each page. "Rebecca, this isn't just neglect. This is emotional abuse, financial manipulation, potential fraud. You've got a case here." The words were like oxygen. We filed motions for child support adjustments, for reimbursement of funds siphoned without consent, for protective measures against harassment. It wasn't about revenge. It was about accountability. About showing Sophie and Lily that truth had weight. That justice wasn't just a story in books. When the summons hit, the storm truly broke. Patricia called me in tears, her voice cracked and shrill. "How could you do this to us? To your own family?" I answered calmly, "You did this to yourself," and hung up. In court, their masks slipped. Edward tried to bluster, his voice booming in the chamber. Patricia clutched her pearls, dabbing her eyes, playing the victim. Michael sneered, But every time the lawyer presented another piece of evidence, his smirk faltered. The recordings were the worst for them. Patricia's voice clear as day. Girls will never be as important as boys. Edward's words, invest in Henry, not in the girls. Their cruelty echoed across the room, impossible to deny. I watched their faces crumble under the weight of their own voices. For once, they couldn't twist reality. They couldn't gaslight me. The judge's ruling wasn't cinematic thunder. It was calm, measured, but final. Financial restitution for funds misappropriated. Custody reaffirmed solely to me, with a note in the record about the harmful environment at my parents' house. A restraining order against harassment. But the real victory wasn't on paper. It was in the faces of my daughters when we left the courthouse. Sophie held her head higher than I'd ever seen. Lily skipped down the steps, humming a tune, her stuffed rabbit tucked safely under her arm. We went out for ice cream that night. Just the three of us. Sophie leaned across the table, sprinkles dotting her smile. Mommy, they can't hurt us anymore, right? No, I said, and this time I meant it. Word spread fast in the neighborhood. Friends who had once nodded politely now whispered behind Patricia's back. The Golden Boy's shrine in their hallway became a symbol of shame. Vanessa, once so smug, avoided me in public, her eyes darting anywhere but mine. And Michael, well, his voice lost its arrogance when he realized the money he counted on had dried up. I didn't need revenge. Life was delivering it on its own. But I did savor the quiet victories, the empty silence when I blocked their calls, the way my house, small, imperfect, patched together, buzzed with warmth while theirs grew colder. For once, I wasn't living under their shadow. I was building something new. Justice wasn't just the court ruling. It was watching my daughters pin their artwork proudly on our walls without fear it would be torn down. It was hearing Lily laugh freely, Sophie sing again. It was the way we could breathe, together, without apology. They had tried to erase us. Instead, they had written our story of survival, and standing in the glow of our crooked little home, I knew we had won. The house is quiet now, not the suffocating silence of my parents' walls, but the kind that hums with peace. Our little two-bedroom place creaks when the wind blows, the pipes groan when the shower runs too long, and the floorboards squeak under our steps. But it's ours. Sophie painted the living room window with watercolors last week, bright yellows, messy purples, a crooked rainbow. Lily taped her drawings all over the fridge, declaring it our gallery. The marks on the walls are ours. The laughter that fills the air is ours. No one can take that away anymore. Some nights, I still wake up with my heart pounding, the echo of Patricia's words in my ears. Girls will never be as important as boys. But when I hear my daughters breathing softly down the hall, I know that statement is nothing but a lie. We have routines now. Pancakes on Sundays, movie nights on Fridays, the three of us tangled up on the couch with popcorn spilling everywhere. I read them stories before bed, and sometimes Sophie reads to Lily, her little voice careful and strong. They don't flinch anymore when someone knocks on the door. They don't ask if their drawings will be thrown away. They don't cry when it's time for bed. Healing is slow, but it's steady. I think about my parents sometimes, about Edward's thunderous voice, Patricia's cold smile, Michael's arrogance, Vanessa's smirk. Once those memories would have hollowed me out. Now they remind me of what we survived. They remind me that survival is more than endurance. It's choosing to fight back, even when your knees shake. Do they regret what they did? I don't know. Maybe they tell themselves I betrayed them. Maybe they still believe Henry deserves more because of his gender. Maybe they sit in that big house, staring at the shrine of photographs, wondering why it feels so empty. That's not my burden anymore. My burden is here, making sure Sophie and Lily grow up never doubting their worth, making sure they know their voices matter, that their dreams are valid, that they are not defined by the cruel words of people who should have protected them. Sometimes I catch them watching me quietly, as if they're still measuring whether this freedom is real. I meet their eyes and smile, even on the hard days, because I want them to know, yes, it's real. We built it, and no one can tear it down. Life isn't perfect. Money is tight. Work is exhausting. And single motherhood isn't a fairy tale. But when I tuck them into bed at night, and Sophie whispers, I love our home, I know I made the right choice. Justice wasn't just about the court. It was about breaking the cycle. It was about walking away when everyone said I couldn't. It was about standing in front of my daughters and saying, you matter, you always will. That's the legacy I want to leave them. Not silence, not submission, but strength. And now I wonder, if you were in my place, if your family treated your children as if they were invisible, unworthy, would you fight back the same way? Would you walk out, even if it meant standing alone, or would you stay, hoping things might change? Tell me, if it were you, what would you have done? And if this story moved you, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us share more powerful stories of strength, justice, and survival. And don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss a story that might just change how you see the world. Thank you.